The morning broke with a strange silence, the kind that creeps into your bones before you even open your eyes. I walked out with my coffee, expecting to see the familiar silhouette of my barn against the rising sun. For decades, that barn had been more than wood and nails. It was my father's pride, my own sweat, and the storage of memories from generations. But instead of the strong wooden walls, all I saw was rubble. Broken beams jutted out of the ground like shattered bones. The roof lay caved in, shingles scattered across the dirt as if a storm had ripped through. My breath caught in my chest, and the coffee turned bitter on my tongue. Neighbors whispered from their porches, their eyes darting between me and the destruction. One of them muttered something about the HOA board coming in yesterday with heavy equipment. The words barely registered at first, but then anger began to swell. They had done this. Those smug officials who thought they could control every inch of land they didn't even own. They hadn't left a single board intact, not even the weather vane I carved myself years ago. I dropped the mug in the dirt, the ceramic shattering just like the barn. Every corner of my chest ached, not just with loss but with humiliation. They hadn't just destroyed a building. They had stripped away a part of me, and worst of all, they had done it without fear of consequence, believing I was too small, too powerless to fight back. As I stood there, staring at the ruins, something inside me shifted. Their arrogance had lit a fire I didn't know still burned. That evening, I wandered down the narrow dirt path that led to the dam, my boots crunching against the gravel. The barn's wreckage was still heavy in my mind, but here, standing at the edge of the dam, the rage had a place to focus. The structure was old but sturdy, built by my father's hands and reinforced by mine over the years. It wasn't just a pile of concrete and steel, it was a lifeline. The dam held back acres of water that fed into the wide, sparkling lake everyone in the community adored. The HOA bragged about that lake in their glossy newsletters, a gem of the neighborhood, they called it. They plastered photos of the calm waters behind their brochures, luring in new buyers and charging ridiculous fees for lakeside privileges. They made it sound like they had built it, like it was their accomplishment. The truth was, that water existed because of me and my family. Without the dam, that lake was nothing but a dry basin surrounded by dead grass. I leaned on the cold railing, staring at the old metal valve wheel near the center. I had tightened it 1,000 times before, careful to keep the flow steady. If I wanted, I could open it all the way, let the water roar down into the creek bed, and drain the lake like pulling the plug from a bathtub. The idea made my heart pound harder. The HOA had bulldozed my barn without hesitation, without a word of respect. They thought they were untouchable, sitting in their meetings with smug grins and ironclad rules. But standing here, I realized something they hadn't bothered to consider. They needed me more than I needed them. This dam was my barn, my legacy, my leverage. One twist of the valve, and their prized lake, the crown jewel of their empire, would turn to mud. The thought lingered as the last of the sunset bled into the horizon. The weekend came faster than I expected, and with it, the HOA's big event. They had been advertising it for weeks, a lakeside barbecue with live music, catered food, and a celebration of community spirit. As I stood on the ridge above the water, hidden beneath the shade of the pines, I couldn't help but feel the sharp twist of irony in those words. Community spirit, they said, while standing on the ruins of my barn. From my vantage point, the scene looked like something out of a glossy magazine. Strings of lights shimmered along the pavilion, their glow reflected on the calm surface of the lake. Children's laughter carried across the water as they splashed in brightly colored kayaks. Music played from a live band, loud enough to echo against the hills, and the smell of smoked meat drifted on the breeze. HOA board members strutted about like kings at a coronation, shaking hands and soaking in praise for the beautiful lake they had preserved. Not one of them even glanced toward the dam in the distance, the dam they didn't own, the dam they pretended didn't matter. I watched, my jaw tight, as the president lifted a glass in a toast. His words carried faintly to my ears, to our community, and to the lake that makes it all possible. The crowd cheered, clapping and whistling, their voices rising together. My hands curled into fists against the bark of the tree I leaned on. They were toasting my lake, my family's dam, and they had the audacity to act like they had built it themselves. As the night deepened, the laughter grew louder, and the music more reckless. For them, the lake was just a backdrop for cocktails and photographs. For me, it was a reminder of what I had lost, the barn they had torn down without mercy. I felt the weight of the old wrench in my bag, heavy against my side, and the thought burned hotter with every cheer and every smug grin. They thought they were untouchable, but they had forgotten one thing. I still held the key to the water that made their little paradise possible. The night was still when I finally made my move. Midnight had swallowed the neighborhood whole, leaving only the distant hum of crickets and the faint ripple of water lapping against the dam wall. The party at the pavilion had long since died down, the laughter replaced by silence. That silence gave me courage. I slung my flashlight across my chest, the beam cutting a narrow path through the darkness, and gripped the heavy wrench in my hand. Every step toward the dam felt deliberate, as if the earth itself knew something irreversible was about to happen. The air grew colder near the water, damp with the scent of moss and mud. The concrete structure loomed before me, black and solid against the silver glow of the moon. I traced the lines of the dam with my eyes, settling on the valve wheel at its center, a rusted iron circle that had always been more burden than weapon. Tonight, it was both. I crouched beside it, running my fingers over the corroded metal, feeling the years of weathering and use. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears, like a drum calling me to war. I hesitated, the memory of my barn flickering in my mind, the worn wood panels, the smell of hay, the sound of rain against its roof. They had bulldozed all of that in less than an hour, never considering the blood and time poured into it. That thought burned away the hesitation. My grip tightened on the wrench, the cold steel pressing into my palm. I slid it into place and gave the wheel a sharp twist. The valve resisted at first, groaning like some old beast reluctant to wake. I pushed harder, the muscles in my arms screaming, until it finally shifted with a grinding screech that echoed across the water. At first, it was just a trickle, thin streams gushing out beneath the dam into the dry creek bed below. But then the pressure gave way, and the trickle turned into a torrent. The roar of rushing water filled the night, louder and louder, as if the earth itself was exhaling. I staggered back, flashlight trembling in my grip, as the lake began to sink. The surface rippled and swirled, the moon's reflection breaking apart into shards of silver. I stood there for hours, watching the water escape into the darkness. My clothes dampened with mist, my fingers numb from the cold, but I didn't move. Every inch the lake dropped felt like justice returning, slow and steady. The power wasn't in the destruction, it was in the choice. And I had made mine.